$312,000. That is the exact amount I transferred to my son and his wife over the past 7 years. Not counting the tuition I covered before that, not counting the car I replaced when his broke down during residency, not counting the security deposit on their first apartment in Midtown. $312,000, given in increments designed to feel manageable, requested invoices designed to feel desperate. I kept every receipt, not because I planned for this day, because the woman who immigrated to Atlanta at 22 with a nursing degree, no American hospital would honor learned early, that paper remembers what people choose to forget. But I need to go back. I need to take you to the beginning so you understand what was built and by whose hands before I show you how it was dismantled in a single evening over a budget spreadsheet and an apron. My name is Vivian Okafor. I am 63 years old. I was born in Enugu in southeastern Nigeria, the second daughter of a nurse and a school teacher who believed education was the one currency no government could devalue. My mother had a nursing cap from 1959 that she kept on a wooden stand in the parlor, and as a girl I would run my fingers along the starched fabric and imagine the women she had healed, the babies she had caught with those steady hands. I came to America with her steadiness in my bones and a degree the state of Georgia treated like a piece of fiction. They told me my clinical hours didn't transfer. They told me my pharmacology training was insufficient. They told me, in the polite language of institutional refusal, that I would need to start over. So I started over. I worked as a home health aide in Buckhead for families who could afford to be kind and families who could not be bothered. I cleaned wounds, managed medications, bathed people who had forgotten their own children's names, and I saved every dollar that didn't go to rent and rice. I studied for my American nursing boards at the kitchen table of a one-bedroom apartment in Clarkston, while the couple next door screamed at each other through the walls. I passed on my first attempt. Then I worked 3 jobs for 6 years, and in 1994 I opened a single urgent care clinic in a strip mall on Buford Highway, between a laundromat and a store that sold phone cards to West Africa. That clinic became St. Catherine's Medical Center. Today it is a $200 million private hospital system with 3 campuses across metro Atlanta. I built it bed by bed, grant by grant, board vote by board vote. I recruited physicians from teaching hospitals that wouldn't look at them twice. I created a mentorship program for immigrant medical graduates because I remembered what it felt like to hold a degree that meant nothing to the people who controlled the doors. I sit as chair emeritus of the board. My signature is on the founding charter that hangs, framed in the lobby of the main campus on Peachtree Dunwoody Road. I tell you this not to boast. I tell you this because my own son describes me to his colleagues as someone who works at a hospital and lets them assume I push a mop. I need to tell you about the stethoscope. It sits in my nightstand drawer, the one from the strip mall clinic. The earpieces wrapped in medical tape because I couldn't afford to replace them and refused to use a cracked instrument on a patient's chest. I kept it the way my mother kept her nursing cap. A reminder, not of what I built, but of who I was when I had nothing and still showed up. Marcus is my miracle. 3 miscarriages before him. 3 times I felt the cramping begin and knew before the ultrasound confirmed what my body was already telling me. When Marcus arrived, screaming and perfect at Grady Memorial at 4 in the morning, I held him against my chest and made a promise that I would build a world soft enough to catch him. I established a $5 million endowment in his name for medical education scholarships. Anonymous, because I didn't want gratitude. I wanted the work done. He became a physician, internal medicine at St. Catherine's, and the pride I felt watching him walk those hallways could have powered the lights in that building. He didn't know I built it. He didn't know because I never told him, and I never told him because I wanted him to earn his place on his own terms, and because a part of me, the part that still carried the sting of his father's Senegalese family calling me that Igbo nurse when they thought I couldn't hear, believed that accomplishment should speak for itself, that people who love you will eventually see. Then Marcus married Chantal. Chantal is brilliant in rooms. She understands how to arrange a sentence so the listener feels included and diminished at the same time. She organizes charity galas with the precision of a military campaign and the warmth of a press release. She applied for a department head position at St. Catherine's, and I read her peer reviews because that is my role. Politically gifted but clinically average. Those were not my words. Those were the words of 3 independent reviewers. She has been passed over for 2 years, and she blames old money politics, and my son believes her. And I have watched this from the chair where I sit because I am the old money she is blaming and she does not know it. Easter Sunday, April in Atlanta, the dogwoods just beginning to bloom, that particular soft light that comes through the kitchen window of Marcus and Chantal's house in Druid Hills. I arrived with a casserole dish of jollof rice because my mother's recipe requires a full afternoon and I believe food carries intention. Chantal met me at the door. She was wearing cream linen. Her smile was exact. She handed me an apron. "You probably feel more comfortable helping in the kitchen anyway," she said, "since you're used to serving." The apron was blue cotton with a grease stain near the pocket. She had been saving it, not the one hanging on the hook by the stove, the old one from the drawer. I noticed because I notice everything, and because when you have been dismissed by professionals and amateurs alike for 4 decades, you learn to read the costumes someone chooses for you. I took the apron. My hands were steady. My chest was not. I tied it behind my back and went to the kitchen and finished the meal my daughter-in-law was too busy entertaining to cook. And when I left early, I heard Marcus's voice behind me saying nothing. Saying absolutely nothing. He texted later. Not to me. To me, he sent silence. To his phone, where he thought I couldn't see, he texted something I only learned about weeks later. "Chantal was trying to include you in her way. You're always looking for offense, Mom." Always looking for offense, as though offense were something I hunted instead of something delivered to my door wrapped in blue cotton. Then came the Gala, Chantal's charity event for pediatric research, held at the Piedmont Grand directly across the street from St. Catherine's main campus. I attended because Marcus asked. I wore my gray silk because it asks nothing and answers nothing, and I stood near the back because I know how to occupy a room without taking up space. That is a skill you learn when the world has been telling you to be smaller since you arrived. A board member saw me. Dr. Abiodun, who has known me for 22 years, who was present at the dedication of our second campus, who understands exactly what my name means to that institution. He bowed slightly, not deeply, not dramatically, the kind of bow a person offers when they recognize quiet authority. Chantal saw it. I watched her face process it, cycle through confusion, land on mockery. She assumed he was being sarcastic. She assumed because in her framework of the world, the only reason a distinguished physician would bow to Vivian Okafor is as a joke. What Chantal said next made the caterer behind me drop a champagne flute. She turned to a cluster of guests, women in cocktail dresses holding auction paddles, and introduced me. "This is Marcus's mother, Vivian. She does domestic work for some families in Buckhead." She smiled. The guests smiled. One of them asked which families. Chantal said, "Oh, you know, the old Buckhead crowd?" And the conversation moved on like I was a piece of set dressing that had been adequately explained. Domestic work for some families in Buckhead. My signature sits on the founding charter of the hospital whose shadow fell across that ballroom. A daze found me in the bathroom. My goddaughter, an ER physician who trained under my mentorship program, who I delivered myself when my clinic couldn't afford a second doctor. She had overheard everything. She touched my arm. When a daze touches your arm, she is holding you back. She looked at me with those eyes that carry her mother's fire. "Auntie, you delivered me when your clinic couldn't afford a second doctor. These people don't know who they're standing beside." I said nothing. I dried my hands. I returned to the ballroom. But something had shifted, not in the room, in me. The ledger began the following Tuesday. I sat at my desk in the apartment Chantal thinks is too large for a woman on fixed income, and I opened the spreadsheet I had maintained for years because old habits from running a $200 million health system do not simply disappear. I began separating the personal from the institutional. The tuition supplements, $48,000, the car, $31,000, the down payment assistance, $60,000, structured as a gift to avoid tax complications, the emergency transfers, 17 in total over 5 years, each accompanied by a phone call from Marcus that began with silence and ended with a number, 173,000. Groceries, flights, the honeymoon contribution Chantal described as a family tradition we assumed you'd want to honor. furniture for the nursery that never materialized, the country club membership Marcus said he needed for networking. Line by line, year by year, $312,000. And when I looked at it, all of it, arranged in rows and columns, I did not cry. I felt something drain out of me. Something I had been calling love that was actually a loan I had been servicing against my own dignity. Then I found the scholarship request. My foundation director forwarded it as a routine matter. A physician in internal medicine had formally requested that his department be excluded from the Okafor Medical Education Scholarship Program. The reason given was concern about the appearance of nepotism. The request was dated 14 months before it reached my desk. He had thought about it for 14 months. He had composed a formal letter to ensure that the anonymous gift his mother had created to honor the son she almost never had would never touch him or anyone near him. My foundation director had no idea Marcus was my son. The request was processed as standard administrative correspondence. I closed the laptop. I opened the nightstand drawer. I held the stethoscope, the tape rough against my thumbs, and I pressed the chest piece against my own heart. It was beating fast. But it was beating and I was alive, and being alive meant I could choose what happened next. If you have ever funded someone else's life while they explained your limitations to strangers, if you have ever discovered that your generosity was not just unacknowledged but actively concealed, then you already know the temperature of what I felt. It is not hot. It is not the heat of anger. It is cold. It is the cold of clarity. Take a breath with me, and if this is resonating with something you have been carrying, stay with me. Because what I did next is what I wish someone had shown me years ago. Marcus sent flowers the following week, a card. Sorry about Easter, let's do brunch. No mention of the apron, no mention of the gala, no mention of the word domestic. The flowers were lilies, and they were beautiful, and I understood with perfect precision that they were not an apology but a reset button. He was not sorry, he was managing. I watered the lilies, I began to plan. The hospital's annual benefactors' dinner was scheduled for 16 days from that evening. As chair emeritus, I had the authority to add agenda items. I contacted my attorney, the one who structured the original founding documents, and I requested a full review of naming rights protocols. I contacted the AJC journalist who had interviewed me 12 years prior for a small feature that was killed by an editor who didn't think an immigrant hospital founder was news. I told her the story was ready now, if she still wanted it. I requested that the board add a formal retirement announcement to the dinner program. Mine. 16 days from that dinner, the invitations would go out. There was a moment when I almost failed. The hospital newsletter photographer caught me at a board meeting that Marcus happened to attend for a departmental briefing. I saw his head turn as the flash went off. I stepped behind Dr. Abiodun, who understood without being told. Marcus looked, saw nothing, returned to his phone. My heart was in my ears. The taste of adrenaline sat metallic on my tongue. Adese called that night. "Auntie, are you sure?" I was quiet for a long time. I thought about Marcus as a baby, the weight of him, the impossible smallness of his fingers. I thought about the endowment. I thought about Chantal's rejection letter. I knew that letter. I had dictated it myself that Tuesday, the same Tuesday I started the ledger. "Adese," I said, "I am 63 years old. I built a hospital so no black immigrant woman would be dismissed the way I was, and my own son dismisses me to protect his wife's pride." She said nothing for 5 seconds, then, "I will be there." The evening they came to fix me was a Thursday. Marcus and Chantal arrived at my apartment. The one Chantal had privately suggested I should downsize because Marcus carries enough stress supporting both households, and I don't really need 3 bedrooms. They brought a budget spreadsheet. They had prepared a presentation for my financial future on their laptop, color-coded, with a section labeled "Realistic Monthly Expectations for Fixed Income." They sat on my sofa. Chantal crossed her legs. Marcus cleared his throat the way he does when he is performing the role of dutiful son. Chantal opened the laptop. She began explaining my budget to me. She was still explaining my budget to me. I let her finish. When she was done, when she had outlined how I could reduce my grocery spending and suggested I look into senior transit passes, I said, "Thank you, Chantal. I appreciate the effort." And then I stood. I walked to the mahogany cabinet in the hallway, the one they had always assumed held old china. I opened it. On the top shelf, my original clinic license, dated 1994 Buford Highway address, signed by the state of Georgia and by me. On the middle shelf, the hospital dedication plaque. St. Catherine's Medical Center, founded by Vivian and Kechi Okafor, 1997. On the bottom shelf, a manila folder. I handed it to Chantal. She opened it. Inside was the formal rejection letter for her department head application. At the bottom, the signature of the board chairwoman. My signature. The room went silent. Not the silence of an empty house. Not the silence after a cruel remark. The silence of two people whose entire understanding of the world has just been removed from underneath them like a tablecloth yanked from a set table. Marcus spoke first. "What is this?" "That," I said, "is my hospital. I built St. Catherine's Medical Center 31 years ago from a clinic in a strip mall. I serve as chair emeritus of the board. The wing you work in was funded by an anonymous donation I made 6 years ago when the original structure failed inspection. The scholarship program you had your department excluded from carries your name. I established a $5 million endowment for it the year you were born." Chantal's mouth was open, not speaking, open. Her hands were flat on the spreadsheet she had made for my fixed income. "The domestic work I do for families in Buckhead?" I continued. "The mopping you let your colleagues assume. The apron you handed me at Easter. The 3 bedrooms you think I don't need." I paused, not for effect, because my throat was closing and I needed it to open again. "Every dollar I gave you came from an institution I built with my hands in a country that told me my hands weren't qualified." Marcus stood up, sat down, stood up again. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to see me without being told what to look at." Chantal reached for the folder. I watched her flip to the peer reviews. Politically gifted but clinically average. She read it twice. Her jaw tightened. She looked at Marcus. Marcus was looking at the plaque. "The Gala," Chantal said, "the board member who bowed. Dr. Abiodun, he has served on my board for 22 years. He wasn't mocking me." "No." She closed the folder. She stood. She did not look at me. She picked up the laptop with the budget spreadsheet and walked to the door. Marcus stayed. His eyes were wet. His hands were shaking. He opened his mouth 3 times before words came. "Mom, the scholarship. I didn't know it was yours. I didn't know any of it was yours." "You didn't ask, Marcus. In 7 years, you never once asked what I built or what I own or what I do when you're not calling to ask for money. You told the world I was a janitor because it was easier than being curious about your own mother." He left. The door closed softly, which was worse than a slam. A slam is an emotion. The soft click was management. Even now, even after everything, I did not expose Chantal publicly. I did not rescue Marcus. I simply did what I had been planning. At the annual benefactors dinner, I announced my retirement from the board. The hospital's naming rights ceremony followed. Marcus sat in the 3rd row and watched a bronze plaque unveiled, the Vivian Okafor Pavilion. His name tag said internal medicine. His face said everything his mouth had never learned to say. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran my story on the front page of the Sunday edition. Immigrant nurse who built Atlanta's St. Catherine's Medical Center steps down after 31 years. They used the photo from 1994, me standing in front of the strip mall clinic, stethoscope around my neck, the sign hand-painted because I could not afford a professional one. Chantal's gala guests received invitations to the dedication ceremony. Every single one. I did not send them. The hospital's public relations team sent them because it was a major institutional event, and the guest list overlapped considerably with the charitable circles Chantal had so carefully cultivated. The women who had nodded politely when she introduced me as someone who does domestic work now stood in a pavilion with my name etched in stone above the entrance. I heard from Adeze that Chantal did not attend, that Marcus came alone and stood at the back, that he touched the bronze lettering with his fingertips after the crowd thinned. I do not know what he felt. I have stopped trying to feel it for him. Chantal's charity contacts began asking questions, not confrontationally, casually, over coffee, at events. "Did you know about your mother-in-law's hospital?" The questions had no accusation in them, which made them worse. They simply revealed a gap between the woman Chantal had presented and the truth. Her social media went quiet for 3 weeks. Her next gala was postponed. The committee she chaired experienced what the co-chair described as a recalibration of leadership dynamics. Marcus called 4 times. The first call was demanding. "You could have handled this privately." The second was confused. "I don't understand why you kept this from me." The third was bargaining. "Let's sit down, the three of us, and talk about how to move forward as a family." The fourth was the only one that mattered. His voice was small. "I told people you were a janitor, Mom. I told people you were a janitor and you built the building." I did not answer the fourth call either, not because I was punishing him, because I had nothing left to say that he couldn't find in the lobby of his own workplace. Now I am sitting in the courtyard of my family compound in Enugu, the one I rebuilt with cash 15 years ago, but visited only twice because I was too busy funding a life in Atlanta that did not include me. My surviving aunties are beside me. Mama Neka is telling a story about a goat that escaped during a wedding in 1983, and the laughter is so loud and so full that I can feel it in my collarbone. The jollof rice is from my mother's recipe, the one I brought to Easter in a casserole dish that Chantal never served. Here, the dish is empty. Here, people reached in with their hands and ate until the pot was scraped clean. The stethoscope is here, too. I brought it in my carry-on, wrapped in a cloth. It sits now in a glass case in the parlor beside my mother's nursing cap from 1959. 2 instruments, 2 women, 1 thread. The evening air smells like wood smoke and ripe mango, and the particular red dust that rises when children run across the compound yard. I am drinking palm wine from a calabash that my aunt carved herself, and my body is doing something it has not done in years. It is resting, not sleeping, resting. The kind of rest that happens when you stop holding up a structure no one asked you to build and no one thanked you for maintaining. There is a term in psychology for what I experienced. It is called the invisible provider syndrome, the dynamic in which one family member assumes disproportionate financial and emotional responsibility, while the beneficiaries not only fail to acknowledge the support, but actively minimize the provider's status to avoid feelings of indebtedness. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that 68% of primary financial providers in extended family systems report that their contributions are taken for granted within the first 5 years. A separate study published in the Journal of Family Psychology found that family members who are financially dependent on a relative are 43% more likely to publicly diminish that relative's social status as a subconscious mechanism to reduce perceived power imbalance. They make you smaller, so the debt feels smaller. They rewrite your story so the help doesn't count. I did not shrink, not permanently, but I bent. I bent for years, and straightening cost me more than any check I ever wrote. If you have ever watched someone explain your own accomplishments to you, like they did you a favor by noticing, you understand why I served my silence cold. Tell me in the comments, when did you stop shrinking yourself for people who wouldn't recognize your full height? I want to hear your moment. I want to know what finally straightened your spine. And if you are still bending, still writing checks against your own dignity, still answering calls that only come with a dollar amount attached, I want you to hear me. You are not a bank. You are not a safety net. You are a person who deserves to be seen standing at your full height, in your own name, in a room that knows exactly who you are. Tell me where you are listening from right now. Drop your city, your country. Let me know this reached you. And if this story sat with you, if it made you think of your own ledger, the one you keep in your chest even when there is no spreadsheet, then like this, subscribe, and stay with me. Because I have more to tell. And the next story might be yours. The palm wine is warm, the aunties are laughing, the compound is full. And for the first time in 30 years, no one in this courtyard needs a single thing from me except my company. That is not loneliness. That is peace. And I built it the same way I built everything, one honest brick at a time.